Hello again, everybody. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about the early management theories in nursing. While modern clinical leadership is not an accident of history, it is a highly structured evolution. Historically, nursing emerged or it came out from religious and military traditions, which emphasized obedience, duty, and self-sacrifice. However, as healthcare transitioned into large-scale hospital networks in the 19th and 20th centuries, administrative boards turned to industrial management models to organize work, to control costs, and also to regulate personnel. So, we are going to introduce a major tension in nursing leadership, the mechanistic efficiency versus humanistic caring. And to make this historical exploration highly relevant to modern practice, we are going to analyze these early management styles through two contemporary academic anchors, the ethical legal boundary. Okay, this is grounded in the absolute requirements of professional delegation, accountability, and legal repercussions of fragmented clinical judgment under jurisprudence. Okay. Another is the clinical re-entry and competence, or the clinical re-entry and competence lens. According to Ray and Kitson, this is focused on how organizational structures or workplace culture and leadership styles impact a clinician's or nurse's psychological safety, how they transition stress, and professional self-efficacy. Okay, let's talk about some examples, basic examples to uh, better analyze this. Okay, let's think about a hospital unit as a factory. Okay. In the early 1900s, hospital administrators literally they view patient units as assembly lines, like uh, and illness was processed and health was the output. Okay, today we realize that our patient is not a uniform piece of machinery. So when we walk into a room as nurses, we are navigating a complex physiological instability, emotional distress, and legal accountability. So if we treat that interaction purely like an assembly line, definitely the system will break down. Let's talk about the primary analytical frameworks or we talk about contextualization. Our key focus here is detailing the complementary nature of our two modern anchors, okay? The ethics and jurisprudence by Luan Singh and confidence and competence by Ray and Kitson. Okay? According to Luan Singh, his framework is grounded in the legal and ethical boundaries of practice. Okay. It answers who is accountable when critical or clinical systems fail, how do early management theories compromise or enhance patient safety laws, while for Ray and Kitson, it is grounded in the experience of nurses transitioning or returning to practice. It answers how do structural and social climates impact a nurse's confidence and ability to deliver safe, effective, and efficient care. Okay. So to critically analyze early industrial management models, we must understand the core parameters of our two analytical frameworks. Let's first start with Luan Singh, okay? The professional nursing practice, ethics, and jurisprudence. So he established that nursing is a regulated, legally bound profession. that is central to this is the concept of accountability. Under malpractice law and professional nursing codes, a nurse is responsible for their own actions and the outcomes of any task they delegate. So, what's the key issue here? Okay, we have to always remember that delegation is not merely just handing off, but it requires continuous assessment, evaluation, and supervisory control. If a management structure forces a nurse to practice in a way that separates task execution from critical thinking, then it creates immediate legal liability. Okay. The next one is, according to Ray and Kitson, okay, about returning to nursing practice. We talk about confidence and competence. According to them, they focus on cognitive and emotional realities of nurses, particularly those navigating professional transitions or those who are re-entering the workforce after a long absence. Okay, what's our key issue here? Professional competence is not or never a static checklist of technical skills such as yung IV insertion natin or yung programming yung infusion pump. Okay? But it is a dynamic state of self-efficacy. So when a nurse clinical confidence is highly fragile, it is directly shaped by the social, organizational, and physical scaffolding of their work environment. If the environment is punitive or overly mechanistic, nurses who are returning to the profession suffers from severe transition anxiety, which later on caused cognitive overload and increased clinical error rates. Okay. Anong mga examples nito? Let's talk about some examples. Okay. For example, a nurse on a busy medical surgical unit who is overwhelmed following the hospital's routine workflow. So what happened is that they delegate all vital sign checks for their 6 patients to a nursing aide or a nursing assistant. So the assistant will record a blood pressure of 82 over 44, okay, for someone who is post-operative. However, that nursing assistant did not immediately verbally notify the nurse on duty. So, if the nurse will not review the electronic charting or the chart of the patient, let's say until 4 hours after, so by which this time, the patient has already progressed into severe septic shock. So, what will be the legal implication of this? Under the framework of Luansing, the nurse still holds the ultimate legal liability, while the assistant, well, failure to communicate lang. However, on the nurse part, he or she failed in their duty of supervision and evaluation. Now, let's talk on the other hand, the reality of transition under about according to Ray and Kitson. Okay. For example, the scenario is there is a highly experienced pediatric nurse who returns to active practice after, for example, 10 years, okay, of career break, maybe to support the family, okay. On her first day back, he experienced a very fast-paced inpatient ward. So, she faced updated digital charting system to which is not present or was never present 10 years back, okay? And complex infusion pumps and an environment that is very chaotic. So, to analyze this psychologically, this a nurse who is returning despite having a deep baseline clinical knowledge, he or she would still experience severe anxiety if the unit management style is cold, rigid, and unsupportive. So her cognition will be entirely consumed by anxiety, rendering her unable to safely apply her clinical reasoning. Let's talk about the scientific management theory or the bedside Taylorism because it's about Taylor. Okay. What is the focus of this? Okay. Frederick Winslow Taylor's concept of standardizing physical labor to locate the one best way and its transition to nursing. So Taylor focused strictly on efficiency, output, and the split up or the splitting up of work. So in nursing, this is the birth of functional nursing. Instead of having a holistic approach where one nurse manages all aspects of patient care, tasks were divided. For example, nurse A only distributes or administer medication. Nurse B management for example of wound dressing, and yung nursing assistant will take all the vital signs. Okay. So, uh, according to Taylor, scientific management theory was developed in the late 19th century, and it aims to maximize industrial output by scientifically analyzing workflow. He broke down every physical movement during the time in the factory into discrete timed component or time and motion studies to be able to eliminate waste and establish the one best way to perform a task. In healthcare, this Taylorism directly gave birth to the functional nursing model, which was widely adopted during the severe nursing shortage period, particularly during the time during the World War II. So in this model, the clinical unit is run like an assembly line. Okay? Care is completely fragmented into repetitive and specialized tasks. Instead of one nurse caring for a patient holistically, the task is distributed among various staff members based on their training level. Okay. So, sabi nga natin, the medication nurse passes medications to all patients in the floor. Yung treatment nurse, okay, for example, for all wound dressing, and then the nursing assistant or nursing attendants is in charge of overall vital signs. So, um, this model is highly efficient in terms of speed and in terms of lowering staff cost because it allows less skilled workers to perform a highly repetitive task under minimal supervision. However, it completely strips or it completely takes away the patient of their humanity and destroys clinical continuity. Now, let's now try to critique the scientific management. Okay. So, critically assessing Taylorism using our two primary frameworks, the ethical and legal threat. Okay. So, for example, okay, if a nurse is or nurse A is in charge of medication only without understanding the global or the overall status of the patient, here the fundamental clinical assessment is entirely lost. This task-only model significantly increases the legal risk of clinical negligence. Now, what is confidence chasm according to Ray and Kitson? For a nurse or a novice nurse or a novice nurse or a nurse who is re-entering, simple tasks feel reassuring at first. Parang they would feel confident doing it at first. However, the true clinical identity and critical reasoning are not task-based. High Taylorism suppresses clinical decision making because basically nurses are only focused on one area of patient care, such as um, wound dressing alone and medication administration alone. So, while this Taylorism, or what we call the functional nursing, offers high task throughput, evaluating it through two contemporary framework uh, ex- parang exposed several vulnerabilities. Let's talk about ethical and legal hazards. When care is fragmented or putol-putol, okay, into isolated tasks, nobody owns the complete clinical picture of the patient. And under professional nursing jurisprudence, a nurse has a legal duty to perform a comprehensive clinical assessment before taking action. So what will be the hazard of this? For example, medication only, di ba? If the medication nurse administers a beta blocker, metoprolol, okay, simply because it is on her checklist and the medication is being ordered, but without knowing that the person in charge to take the vital signs has recorded a very low heart rate, for example, 48 lang. 10 minutes earlier, she has committed a medication error. The fragmented system actively blocks the synthesis of clinical data, turning the nurse into a mechanical actor and creating a massive liability risk for professional negligence. Now, the Stunting Professional Self-Efficacy by Ray and Kitson discussed that developing clinical competence requires an integrated cognitive understanding of patient care. So, if a returning nurse is placed in a functional system to which they are restricted to doing nothing but admissions, or for example, nothing but IV insertion the whole day, they are being prevented from exercising holistic clinical judgment. They become dependent on standardized checklists. And when a patient exhibits subtle or yung mga non-textbook signs of clinical deterioration, for example, yung mga early stage sepsis or yung mga subtle changes in neurological status, the checklist-dependent nurse or the returning nurse will fail to recognize the danger because the signs do not fit into a neat task box. Wala kasi yun sa checklist niya. So, this breeds a false sense of competence while helping the nurse's actual clinical confidence incredibly and severely low. Now, let's go to the classical administrative theory. The focus of this is the transitioning from the raw physical execution at the bedside, which is according to Taylor, to the overall structural architecture of the institution, which is then the focus of Henry Fayol. Okay. What will be our key talking points here? Here, we are going to explain or understand that Fayol look at managers and administration rather than raw physical labor. So he established systematic corporate guidelines that remain deeply embedded in our healthcare system until this period. Okay? While Taylor focused on the physical work occurring at the bedside, Fayol uh, took the top-down structural approach. For Fayol, okay, who is a French mining engineer, he believed that organizational success depends on the systematic administration of the entire enterprise. Okay? Fayol asserted that management is a universal activity that can be applied to any organization, whether yan ay business, yan ay military campaign, or it is a hospital. According to them, or according to him, all managers, for them to become successful, must constantly execute five core administrative functions. And what are these five core administrative functions? We have the planning or the looking into the future and making a draft of the systematic action plan. Another is the second is organizing, which also means providing the physical and social resources that is necessary to run the institution or the organization. Next is the directing or commanding. This means leading, guiding, and supervising the people or the workforce. Okay, the fourth is coordinating or binding together, unifying, and harmonizing all activities and efforts. And the fifth one is controlling, or can also be called auditing, monitoring, and evaluating performance to ensure that everything occurs in conformity with the established rules, goals, and commands. The Fayolan hierarchy and structure is Fayol's visualizing the five managerial functions and how they created the clear clinical reporting paths that we still see in the area today. Okay. So let us walk through Fayol's five major activities: the planning, the organizing, directing, coordinating, and controlling. Okay. So for example, we have the Chief Nursing Officer. Second in line to the Chief Nursing Officer is the Director. And then next in line to the Nursing Director will be the Supervisor and the Staff Nurse. Okay. So this is direct descendant of Fayol's unity of command and division of work. So meaning, the highest in line is the Chief Nursing Officer. Next to her is the Nursing Director. Under the Nursing Director is the Nursing Supervisor. And under the Nursing Supervisor is the Staff Nurse. Okay? So, what is the focus of the Fayolian hierarchy and structure? Okay. That's why the positions in line are being emphasized. So, si Fayol actually developed the 14 principles of management. And two of these principles truly shaped the modern design of hospital organizational chart. Okay. The first is let's talk about the division of works. Under the division of works, this favors specialization to increase output by making employees more efficient. So if you become expert or specialized in one area, then the end product of that will be an efficient care. Now, unity of command is when an employee must receive orders from only one person or one supervisor. If this line of command is broken, okay, authority is undermined and discipline is compromised and stability is threatened. In healthcare, these principles establish the strict, highly vertical command hierarchies that dominate modern medical centers. And this is often modeled as a clean structural flow or top-down authority. Okay. Halimbawa, let's think of a simple example. Okay. Halimbawa, let's talk about escalation protocol. So let us imagine a staff nurse in an ICU who believe that the cardiovascular surgeon made an error in post-operative orders. For example, nagkaroon ng excessive dose in uh, IV drip. Okay? So, if the nurse will follow the hierarchy of Payol, what she will do is that she will immediately call the chief medical officer of the hospital, okay, or the CEO. But instead of what I mean is she will not immediately call the chief medical officer or the hospital CEO. But instead, they will follow the strict vertical chain. So he will the nurse will start from the charge nurse, then if unresolved, the charge nurse will escalate the issue to the unit manager, and if still unresolved, the unit manager will escalate to the clinical director or hospital administrator, who will also communicate to the chief of the cardiovascular department. So this vertical escalation maintains systemic order. Yes, it prevents chaos kasi nga may flow because and uncoordinated communication because everything is coordinated across all departments. And that ensures that senior administrators are kept informed through structured, predictable channels. However, the problem here is that we have to wait a long queue before the issue will reach the top level management, which to whom is needed to decide about the final decision to do to the patient. So what is now the loophole of this? If the condition requires immediate attention, then it could lead really to a problem. Now let's talk about the classical theory, the modern pros and cons of administrative hierarchy in nursing. According to Luan Singh, clear hierarchy is highly effective in establishing legal lines of delegation because it identifies who has the ultimate responsibility and reliability to a particular patient. Okay. On the other hand, according to Ray and Kitson, okay, they believe that clear chains of command reduce anxiety for new or returning staff members by giving them an ambiguous channel for seeking assistance. Okay. The risk of this is when the chain of command is too rigid or punitive. The staff nurses may become too intimidated to report errors that will eventually raise safety concerns. Now, let us evaluate uh, Fayol's top-down classic model that reveals major clinical benefits alongside serious psychological and safety risks. Let's talk about the legal clarity in delegation. From a legal perspective, Fayol clearly organized or the or Fayol's clear organizational hierarchy is very important. It was explained or it has explained that nursing jurisprudence relies on the explicit tracking of authority and responsibility. Of course, there's a benefit of that. Because when a hospital has an established hierarchical chain, it is legally clear who holds the authority to delegate tasks and who is responsible for monitoring compliance. For example, if a unit manager fails to audit wastage the wastage records to their unit, and then the nurse diverts a controlled substance, the hierarchy will help legal investigators to determine if the manager violated their administrative duty of controlling under licensing laws. Now, on structural scaffolding for transitioning staff, the benefit, according to Ray and Kitson, emphasize that a well-defined, predictable administrative structure will provide psychological comfort. Because here, people will know exactly who is their immediate superior. And having a clear go-to person, or in the hospital we call them the charge nurse, for some issues in the area will provide a supportive framework that will reduce anxiety and will help them build confidence in performing their role. Now, talking about the command and control risk or the culture of silence, this is the dark side of the hierarchy of Payol because there is the potential to create a highly punitive, authoritative culture. For example, a senior supervisor will use their position to silence the staff nurses who will ask questions or who ask questions. The flow of important safety information will be blocked or will be at stake. A junior nurse who is reprimanded for questioning an incorrect order will eventually stop or control speaking up, which can lead to severe patient safety failure. On the other hand, bureaucratic theory by Max Weber focus on exploring a bureaucratic model characterized by written policies, objective competence, and depersonalization. What are the key points here that they want to emphasize? Okay. In the present situation or in the present on modern nursing, the legacy of Weber is found in clinical pathway manual, in standard operating procedures or SOPs, and strict electronic record keeping. It ensures that regardless of who is on shift, a bedside standard of care is uniformly delivered. Max Weber introduced bureaucratic theory during the Industrial Revolution, and he did not view this as a negative term of slow, redundant paperwork. Instead, he looked at this as the most rational, efficient, and fair way to organize human cooperative work. The ideal bureaucracy operates on several or multiple core pillars. Okay. This first is explicit written rules and procedures. This is where we got the standard operating procedures that are governed by every decision. It is also used on promotion based on technical competence, where employees are hired and promoted based on objective certifications, examinations, and demonstrated skills, and not just by nepotism or personal relationships. It is also used in impersonality, where patients or clients and employees are treated uniformly and impartially, removing the personal biases from administrative uh, decisions. And it is also used on exhaustive written records, where every transaction, clinical event, and decision must be documented. So this process is very or is highly impersonal, is strictly rule governed, and relies entirely on standardized documentation. It actually removes individual guesswork, ensuring that every patient receives a uniform, high quality standard care. Okay. Now, let's talk about or let us uh, compare the standardization versus the real care. Analyzing the dual nature of bureaucracy in high-stakes clinical units, uh, let's talk about adhering to written protocols. So, the many authors believe that adhering to written protocols can be your strongest shield in court. So, they believe in a saying that if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. Okay? That is according to Luan Singh. Now, according to Ray and Kitson, yung complex electronic health record platforms and heavy administrative burdens are primary stressors for those who are or for the returning nurses, which often divert time from human connection to the bedside. Because of course, these returning nurses somehow lacks the skills and the knowledge in the use of the electronic health record. So what's the lesson here? Documentation and standardized care must serve as guidelines to support clinical judgment and not replace holistic advocacy of nurses. The bureaucracy model of Weber provides critical structural stability. However, if it is applied excessively, it can severely impact both legal safety and nurses or health workers' mental health. Okay. Let's talk about the standard charting as a legal shield or standard charting as our legal shield. In medical malpractice lawsuit, the written medical record will be our primary legal evidence. Okay. It is always emphasized that our adherence to standardized, objective, and timely documentation is our ultimate defense in court of law. For example, if a patient develops a severe pressure injury and sue the hospital, the defense will depend entirely on the electronic health records that will show that we, nurses, follow the hospital's standardized procedure in caring for our patient. For example, yung standardized skin turning protocol every 2 hours. However, if we miss this or if the document is missing, the court will legally presume that the care was never done. So again, let me remind you that if it wasn't recorded or if it wasn't documented, then it was never done. Okay. Now, let's talk about the cognitive exhaustion and impersonality. What is the conflict here? While bureaucracy protects the hospital legally, it can also emotionally drain staff nurses or other members of the healthcare team. Uh, The returning nurses or those who are returning from their profession can often feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the charting requirements. So, what will be the outcome? The nurses will be forced to spend 4, 5, 12 hours of shift navigating these complex, rigid, drop-down menus in the computer, completing mandatory electronic checklists, and answering repetitive alert windows, di ba? Mga alerts. And they are pulled away from the bedside or away from the patient. This heavy administrative burden will leave them feeling disconnected from their patients and can eventually lead to burnout, which will strip them of the emotional satisfaction that they originally drew from their nursing care or the tender, loving care of nurses. So, to summarize the standardization versus real care, the, re- the written record or the adherence to written guidelines serves as primary protection against litigation. And the cognitive exhaustion of this is that for those returning practitioners, okay, they are often paralyzed by this bureaucracy and digital record system because it diverts their cognitive energy away from the real patient care. This bureaucratic checklist must support and not dictate clinical decision making. We nurses, we must remain human-centric, patient advocate, and system administrators as our secondary function. Okay. Now, let's proceed to human relations movement. This is according to, ang author nito is si Mayo and McGregor. Here, we are going to introduce the shift from treating employees like machines into recognizing them as human beings with social and emotional needs. Okay. There are several key points here. According to Mayo or Elton Mayo's Hawthorne effect, workers are highly motivated simply by being noticed, valued, and if they are listened to. McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y shift from coercion, which is Theory X, to supportive coaching, which is Theory Y. Theory Y that yields higher productivity and professional satisfaction. Okay, in the by 1930s, early 30s, the limitations of treating patients or human beings like machine parts become very obvious. It was very well known during the time. This human relations movement happened to refocus the management on social dynamics, group behavior, and psychological motivation. Okay. So between 1924 and 1932, Elton Mayo conducted studies at Western Electric's Hawthorne work. During this time, he discovered that physical working conditions like yung kay Florence Nightingale, yung lighting, gano'n, were not primary drivers of productivity, but instead, productivity increased because workers felt observed, valued, and listened to by someone who is higher to them. And this proved that social recognition and feeling part of a valued team can be a very powerful motivators. Now, on the other hand, yung kay Douglas McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y proposed that Managers operate under one of two fundamental assumptions about human nature. The theory X be- believe the theory of being a mechanistic manager, while theory Y is the humanistic leader. Okay. So, theory X assumes workers are inherently lazy, they dislike work, and that they avoid the work if possible. On the other hand, theory X, or the humanistic leader, assumes that workers are self-motivated, take pride in their work, and seek out responsibility. Theory X uses coercive, punitive, and micromanaging styles to force compliance, while Theory Y uses collaborative, supportive, and coaching leadership style to be able to foster growth and development from the people. And then lastly, okay, Theory X as a manager tracks, you know, this is the type of manager who even tracks yung bathroom breaks and immediately write up yung mga minor issues. While Theory Y, as a humanistic leader, empowers staff to lead quality improvement committees. So to summarize, Theory X, the mechanistic manager, assumes workers are inherently lazy, dislike work, and will avoid it if possible. They uses coercive, punitive, and micromanaging styles to force compliance. While Theory Y assumes workers are self-motivated, take pride in their work, and seek out responsibility, and they use collaborative, supportive, and coaching leadership styles to foster growth. Okay, now, human relations talks about trust and integration. This is basically connecting human relations with patient safety cultures and the returning staff nurses. When nurses work in a supportive environment or the theory Y environment, they feel safe admitting mistakes early on, allowing for systematic correction before harm will reach the patient. While the true competence and confidence cannot be built in isolation, and structured peer mentoring networks and positive feedback loops are very important in rebuilding professional self-efficacy. The principle of human relations movement focus on modern nursing practice, particularly when evaluated through safety and professional development lens. Okay. Let us first start on fostering a just culture. Okay. In modern nursing ethics and jurisprudence, we have transitioned away from punitive theory X environment towards uh, what is known as the just culture. So to legally analyze this, a punitive environment is highly dangerous. So if a nurse makes a medication error in the theory X culture, they will just hide it, or they will hide the mistake, and they will avoid everything that will lead to being punished. This will leave patient in danger and prevent the hospital from correcting the systemic issue such as yung mga issue on medication error, ganun. Now, the theory Y becomes the solution or the just culture. Here, errors are treated as opportunities to be able to evaluate the weakness of the system while it fails. Here, nurses are encouraged to report mistakes immediately without fear of unfair retribution. This keeps the patient safe and protects the nurse's license through revocation, okay, or your yes, and the hospital for possible closure. And it also allows the system to redesign its protocol para ma-prevent yung future errors. Now, um, rebuilding self-efficacy via mentorship is also highlighted here, specifically on yung mga returning nurses or transitioning nurses. Okay? Highlighting that returning or transitioning nurses cannot successfully rebuild their clinical competence in an isolating, highly stressed environment. So, the transition program must be grounded in theory why and human relations principles. Rebuilding a staff nurse or a nurse's confidence requires active social scaffolding, such as pairing them with a dedicated non-punitive preceptor or organizing peer support debriefing sessions and providing frequent positive violation or validation. When a returning nurse feels valued, supported, and psychologically safe, they will transition anxiety and they will be allowed their clinical reasoning to improve or to flourish. So, synthesizing nursing leadership, under management theory, we have the scientific, the classical, and bureaucratic, and human relations. What are their core attributes? Scientific is task specialization. Classical is centralized command. Bureaucratic is written standard care or SOPs. Human relations is on relational teamwork. Their clinical application is focused on scientific is focused on functional nursing, classical is focused on nursing hierarchy, bureaucratic is on SOPs and documentation, while human relations is based on shared governance. Okay? So ethics and legal according to Luan Singh and confidence according to Ray and Kitson. According to Lunsing, there is high risk of task-only neglect under scientific, and under classical, it clarifies administrative duty. Bureaucratic allows primary safety and litigation defense, and it promotes open, just culture under human relations. Now, for confidence, building confidence, according to Ray and Kitson, scientific impedes deep clinical analysis, while classical provides clear support structures. Bureaucratic provides high burden of administrative tasks, while human relations supports safety on patient transitions. So let us just analyze this, no? Parang summary lang. So the scientific management explanation of the managing a high volume emergency department. For example, an integrated leader. Under scientific, they will use the standardized code blue or for the CPR. Under bureaucratic, they will implement the standardized EHR, triage sepsis protocols. Under classical or a classical leader, will use command escalation paths for crisis. And for human relations, they will use supportive debriefing to build reliance. So this ends my discussion for this topic. Thank you very much again for listening.